can see. Can you see? No? Okay, just 1 second. Okay, so can you see now my presentation?
Yeah.
Okay, so as it is written, my name is Veledniger. I'm the educational coordinator here in the Mordechai Nilevich Memorial Holocaust Study and Research Center in Israel, in Givat Chaviva. I am not a scholar, so I won't be showing or telling about my previous paper or research. What we do here, we are in the educational department. We meet on a daily or weekly basis, groups coming here to our educational center. The vast majority of our visitors are Israeli teenagers, but also we have visitors from abroad, Europe, United States, and what I will focus on here now is our exhibition. One of our exhibitions here in our educational center is an exhibition called Women in the Holocaust, Faces of Resistance. So at first, maybe it's a question I don't need to ask in this audience, but why dedicate a whole exhibition just for women? So maybe this audience comes with an answer, but when I ask the average teenager, girl or boy, these questions, it's not always very clear why to dedicate a whole exhibition just for women. Joanne, thanks. So it's not like we have a parallel exhibition for men in the Holocaust. But as we dig deeper into this subject, we understand that there is much need to put an emphasis and focus on the women experience and perspective. So when we are talking about women's place or role in history, as probably many of you scholars can see, their place in history has been diminished, overlooked, and forgotten for various reasons. This, I guess, is true throughout history or through the beginning of time, but it's especially true about the study of the Holocaust. And maybe one more thing to say about that, that when we are talking about history, we are mainly talking about his story. History and understanding that if we look about history and what is written about history, we see that the history is what men did, men said, men wrote, and men conquered, what men conquered. And it is very difficult to see and learn what women did at the specific time. What did they think? What did they do? And we understand that although, as some of you mentioned in the previous lectures, Cyclone B didn't differentiate between men and women, we can see historian did. And we understand that although women did were partners to this experience, we rarely hear about them or what do they do. I think one of the best examples we can give in our exhibition talking about women in the Holocaust is the example about, first of all, maybe one of the reasons to give this or to give the place to this women exhibition is the quote by Dr. Emanuel Ringelblum, the great archivist from the Warsaw Ghetto. He wrote, Jewish women at that time wrote a glorious page in the history books. And what we are trying to do in the Holocaust is maybe read this glorious page throughout the visit in our exhibition. So maybe the best example is the story about Dr. Janusz Korczak and Stefa Wilczynska. In our when we have groups arriving here, we usually ask who here knows Janusz Korczak, and the average teenager will raise their hands and say they were educators. He was an educator. He had an orphanage in Warsaw, but this is true also from groups not from Israel. I don't know what the state in your country is, but I see it's true worldwide. And Diffa is a very famous figure for what he did during the time before the Holocaust and the Holocaust and the time of the ghetto. But when we ask who here knows or heard about Stefa or Stefania Wilczynska, the groups become silent. And we use this exhibition to speak about Stefania Wilczynska was leading the orphanage with alongside Dr. Janusz Korczak. It's said that by children of the orphanage who survived the war, they describe if Janusz Korczak was the father of the orphanage, Stefa was the mother. If he was the great pedagogue who was writing the books behind his desk, she was the one doing the actual educational work with the children. She was practicing their unique perception or educational approach. So when we are talking about her, I think it's a good example of showing that they both did a huge heroic thing or admirable thing, also Janusz Korczak and Stefa Wilczynska, but we know that most of us didn't heard about her, and her place in history has been diminished and overlooked and forgotten. So we in Moreshet feel obligated to put a light on those brave women, and I'm going just to share some more examples, but I think the Korczak and Wilczynska story is a great example. Why is it so important to dedicate the whole exhibition for the women in the Holocaust? The next example I'll give is about Roshka Korczak, which was a member of Hashomer HaTzair youth movement in Vilna at the time of the war. And she was a member of the partisans in the forest, Rudniki forest, just outside of the city of Vilnius. And as you can see, she survived the war, and she made Aliyah, and she arrived to Israel. She was one of the founders of Moreshet Institute over 60 years ago. And she talks about her first mission as a woman in the partisans, which not only have to endure or face the difficult or regular difficult as a Jewish or as a partisan, but also as a woman who is a Jewish partisan. And she says, I quote, "I remember in the first underground combat action, I was chosen with another one of our friends. We felt that the whole fate of the female sex depended on us. If we are up to the task, if we will fulfill the role, we will pave the way for all the other girls." I think this great quote gives us maybe a bit of understanding that no man would write this thing, because why does she feel that the entire female sex depended on her or is on her shoulder? Because she knows that if she fails, it's not like they say, okay, Roshka, you are not fit for this role, we'll give it to another woman. She knows that it will mean for the entire women in the partisans. But she also knows that if she will succeed, it will pave the way for the other women in the partisans. And she understands this won't be the fate of a man or a male doing this mission, okay? no one would suggest if Abraham fails his mission that no other man should go to this combat mission. And I think this example gives to another focus on the specific roles, specific challenges women had to face in the Holocaust, even as a partisans, even as a Jew, had an additional challenges. Maybe I'd like to share one more story. Is the story about Irena Sandler, who became famous maybe more in the last 15, 20 years or so from her movie, The Courageous Heart of Irena Sandler, but she was a Polish social worker, non-Jewish, who was able to get inside the ghetto and had a clearance to enter the ghetto and to see what's going on. And she was a member of the Żygota organization in Poland who tried to help Jews and save Jews as much as they can under the German occupation. What she did bravely enough was try to smuggle kids outside the ghetto. This is a very complex mission who not only takes to find families or monasteries to hide the Jewish children when they're outside the ghetto.
Excuse me, I just want to know, can you hear me now?
Yes, Joanne, it's great. So I'll finish mine and you'll be the next.
Thank you.
Okay, so back to Irena Sandler, and not only to find the ones who are will be willing to risk their lives and raise Jewish children as their own outside the ghetto, but to get inside the ghetto to convince parents, Jewish parents, that their children are better off without them. They have a better survivor chance outside the ghetto. And I can speak for myself, but I guess some of your parents also. It's almost imaginable to think that our children are better off without us, and we can't help them. Joanne, if you can mute yourself. Thanks. So it's almost imaginable to think that we can't help our children and there's nothing we can do to save them, and they have a better survivor chance without us. And many parents chose to keep their children and say, whatever happens, we will do it together, and we will stay together. But some of them did acknowledge that maybe their children could survive without them, and they gave them away to Irena Sandler, and she smuggled them, sometimes through a sack of potatoes, sometimes through ambulances, and with the help of other members of the Żygota, we managed to smuggle over 2,500 Jewish children outside the ghetto. Not only that, but she made a list of all the names of the children, their original names and their new names. She had to teach them their new names, their new identities as Polish children, Christian Polish children, sometimes with the Christian prayers. And also she kept a list of the names of the parents and the new hidings of the children, and hid it during the time of the war, in order that after the war, the children can find their parents. Most of the parents didn't survive the war. They were sent to Treblinka and were murdered there, but some of them were able to survive and reunite with their children. But even the kids who didn't reunite with their families, they learned their stories and their new their origin or true identity. And this is Irena Sandler. And I think this is the quote that mainly we use when we're talking about righteous among the nations. Whoever saves a single life saves an entire world, from the Mishnah, from Jewish tradition. And I think these short 3 stories are 3 different kind of courageous stories of heroism, of brave women who are not that famous, who are their names or their faces have been overlooked and forgotten throughout history, And we here in Moreshet are giving them their rightful place throughout history, trying to tell their stories and teach other and teenagers and whoever are visitors to hear more about their unique, brave stories. And there are only 3, and we have over 2 dozen women in our exhibition.